I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over. And, today's episode might sound like a couple of women hanging out over a lunch table because honestly, well, we kind of are virtually. Glory Edim is the founder of Well-Read Black Girl. She's also one of my favorite book people on the planet. And now she's written a memoir called Gather Me. And I love this book, but also you may just hear us nerd out for as long as we can nerd out because, there are moments, right, where everyone comes to the book that they need when they and there's a little bit of overlap in our stories when it comes to reading books. And I'm so happy to see you, my friend. How are you? Can we start with the title of the book? What's happening here?
It's so good to see you. I've been waiting for this conversation so we could catch up, talk books, do all the things. It's great to be in conversation.
We can't talk, though, about your book or the work you've done in books without talking about community first. And I love the title of the book, Gather Me.
Yes.
Right? Like, such a great choice for a title. So I want to start there.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go straight to community because, you and I read for similar reasons.
Yes.
And, sometimes it's all about not quite promotion, a little bit more like come hang out and sit with us. Yeah.
Right. Join our circle, hang out in the book club. Relax a little, take your shoes off. I appreciate book clubs that promote connection, but also buying the book, supporting the author. It's a whole ecosystem, and we're very familiar with it.
Oh, yes, we are. But Gather Me, you're always really deliberate in anything you write, anything you say. Like, I've known you, since when did T.R.E. Jones introduce us? It was a while ago. Like, you were living in Brooklyn.
I want to say, 2016?
Yeah, something like that. So, it's been a minute. Okay, Gather Me. Let's talk about the title.
The title, I was going through a lot of different titles. At one point, it was Show Me What to Do, because I found books were a lot of times the books were directions on what direction I should go in my life, how I should model a certain behavior. It was me looking for some kind of answer. And as I was going, I found this Toni Morrison quote that just stuck out to me. She gathered me, man. She gathers me. And that idea of gathering people in community, reading words that kind of grab your attention and let you sit with it and be still and present. When you're gathered, you are sitting on a strong foundation and you're able to conquer things. You're able to move forward. And that is what I was trying to really do with this memoir, move forward with my life, really write down all the things that I had experienced over the years, for the good and the bad, and be honest about my experience. So when I was going through titles, I was working with my editor, and we were like, you know what, this is it. It was something that just stood out with those two words that felt simple and direct and really spoke to the mission of my organization, but also of this memoir.
I'm going to quote you for a second because I love doing this. There's something magical about finding just the right book at just the right time. It has happened to me over and over, and it never feels like coincidence. It feels like fate or grace. And I have been there as well. And in some cases, you and I have had the same feeling about the same book at similar moments in our lives. But you're going from Toni Cade Bambara to Toni Morrison to Maya Angelou, but it certainly doesn't stop. Nikki Giovanni, it doesn't stop there. So do we want to do this chronologically? How do we want to do this? Because you're a walking encyclopedia.
There were so many books that I had to go back and thank goodness I had my journals from childhood, because that was really what allowed me to go back and look at Little Glory and see all the things that I was reading, all the things that I had written in the margins of books, what I had highlighted, what really stood out in all those different seasons of my life. And I reread a lot. That's I don't know if people know that, but I don't read a book once. I have read Sula 1,000 times. I have read the poetry of Nikki Giovanni over and over again. Honestly, this morning, I was reading a Nikki Giovanni poem. I revisit things to again, give me that sense of direction. So the reading and that refining purpose is so essential to me, because you are a different person every day, how you're feeling when you're trying to give your all in a situation. Sometimes you need to read a sentence that gives you a sense of just oomph, a boost of something that can be okay, will kind of guide me through the day. And I do that with all my books. They're not, I was talking to a friend of mine who is an incredible scholar, and, she kind of balks at the idea of reading for catharsis. She's like, no, we're reading for citations and scholarship. And the way like my mouth fell open, I was like, no, girl, I am reading for like soul healing, for love. Like this sometimes is my therapy. There was a lot of times where I could not afford to go to therapy. So it was me and that Maya Angelou book that like really was getting me through a situation, you know? Reading isn't just something that is simple for me. In the book, I write that like it's a practice like that saves my life every day. Like it is something that I need in my life. I don't know who I would be if I wasn't a reader. And that is regardless of if I started well-read Black girl or not. Like I am a reader through and through. I'm an avid reader. I read across genres and across authors. Like I just love to read. And I think that's like why we connect, why I connect with so many of the authors that I come into fellowship with and community with. We, you know, yes, the title author and writer is there, but they're also incredible readers. You know, like I don't know who Jackie Woodson would be without her being an incredible reader. That goes for Jason Reynolds and so many Evie Savoy. Like when you talk to them and think about their libraries and things that they have read throughout their lives, like that all shows up. And this memoir took so many different iterations. Like, and at one point there were like a lot of letters back and forth, and there were different ways that I wanted to kind of curate it. And I had to take a step back and I was like, let me just stick with the books, you know, like let me think through each book and tie that book with a memory or experience and how I had got through it as I read. So yeah, it's like me being a reader is so essential to me writing this book. And I never thought in a million years that I would write a memoir. So yes, thank goodness for those journals and everything else that had like I was able to use those as reference points.
Yeah, I don't always get to reread as much as you do, but I do tend to reread when it comes to producing this show.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, I'll be reading something, you know, months and months and months before it comes out, and then I have to go back and reread it to prep. So I have actually read Gather Me twice. And I will say you can read it straight through if you want. You really can, but you can also dip in and out. And I've done it a couple of different ways, mostly just to see. And also, I know you in real life, so it's kind of like,
Did you hear my voice in it?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Of course I did. Wait, is that a
was-
real question?
That was the part because I was just like, yes, there are going to be so many strangers reading this book, but I really wanted my friends and family to be like, oh, yeah, that's Glory. That is her enthusiasm. That is sometimes her drama. That's like, that is her truest, most authentic self on the page. I was really striving for that. So I didn't hold back. I did talk about things that are challenging, you know, when it comes to my parents and to even my relationships. I just really put it all out there.
Well, and reading is not a passive act, right? Like there are people who have this perception that you're sitting on a chair and, you know, you're holding a thing in your hands or a device, whatever, however you choose to engage with words and story, you know. I think reading takes lots of different forms, and I just need to stress that whenever I have the opportunity because really reading takes all the forms, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is not in any way, shape, or form passive. I mean, in some cases, it can feel like a cinematic experience where everything's unfurling as you go. Or, you know, there are times where you're reading something where you're like, oh, I cannot charge through this. I cannot finish this in a single sitting.
Mm-hmm.
I need to like sit down, get a snack, maybe move around. What did I just read? You're engaging with the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I read so I can have a bigger world.
Yes.
You know, I grew up in the suburbs of Massachusetts. I am very clear on a lot of what my early life was, but at the same time I wasn't necessarily reading looking just for someone who was exactly like me because frankly there weren't. Like it just didn't, you know, I was coming of age at a different point where, you know, YA wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
Right? So you kind of went straight from like middle reader and a little bit of limited YA to, hey, who's this Philip Roth guy?
Right.
It was a trip, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, yes, there's Maxine Hunkingston. Yes, there's Amy Tan and whatnot. You weren't necessarily reading for representation either. You were reading to help find your voice because your mom was going through a challenging moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to talk about how you came to some of these writers because it's a combination of what you're being taught in class.
Yes.
You know, and when I think back to some of the stuff I was taught, I mean, I almost missed out on John Steinbeck because of the way I was taught Steinbeck. And I was like, do I really, what is happening here?
Yeah.
And East of Eden is, you know, a great American novel as far as I'm concerned. But
absolutely. Yeah.
let's talk about how you came up as Glory reader?
Yeah, there were so many things that I read that were either assigned to me in a classroom, or I was, at the library and like going through the shelves and looking. And honestly, that's how I came across Maya Angelou. It wasn't someone did not like hand me that book and say, you should read it. I was going through the bookshelves and I saw her picture. And that was like, back in the day, some of the vintage books, they have the full photo of the author on the back. Like you see them, like it's completely covers the back. And I remember seeing Maya Angelou and thinking that she looked like one of my aunts or my mother. Like she was smiling wide. She wore a scarf on her head, which I was also like, that's beautiful. Like this fact that she has this like very like natural looking aesthetic that just seemed open and warm. And at that point, I hadn't heard her voice yet. When I heard her voice, that's a whole
Oh,
other
yeah.
story. But like, I remember seeing this picture that it just felt familiar and wanting to read it. So I took it off the shelf. I was way too young to really understand just like the detail of what she was experiencing. And at that time, I tended to like read things aloud. I would read things to my brother or just like read aloud to myself to understand things. I will never forget just being like really just taken aback at how revealing she was, all the things she talked about, how even the cadence of her writing had this like had a rhythm to it. It felt like she was like really talking to you in real life. And unlike the books that I had read in school that felt more conservative or more prescriptive, this just had like an energy, very just like clear and almost a loudness to it when I would like read it out loud. And I felt very inspired by that. Again, I didn't understand it. I would reread it again in high school and then in college and continue to read all of her autobiographies and see like a fuller picture of her life and the way she just held her self-worth and just like she just exudes this confidence and this presence that commands you to respect her. Even though I didn't fully understand it as a young person, I just gravitated towards that and wanted to emulate that. And I wanted to just be like full of myself and able to talk about everything that had happened in my life with just this like sense of clarity. So that was like the beginning of yearning for that. But also, I don't think I was always like looking for representation. So for me, it was like a sense of survival. Like I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, and it is a very multicultural space where, the norm is to say, I'm first generation this. So I felt very proud to be Nigerian. I had a very diverse classroom when I, graduated from high school. I just felt very comfortable in that space. What I didn't fully understand what was happening like behind the scenes. I'm a product of divorce. My parents are divorced. And, when my mom was ill, I had never really had any experiences with other people, maybe dealing with mental health crises or talking about that aloud. It felt like a very shameful secret within our family. And so I didn't know how to really talk about those things. And so as I was like looking for books that would help me cope with my parents separating or even understanding what it meant for someone to have depression, like that was always a revelation because I'm just like, oh, I don't see that and I don't understand that. Those are the things that I was like really seeking out and looking for, just the other representations of what families could look like and what healing could look like and how we could like come together and talk about those things without being embarrassed or ashamed, like really feeling like there's a safe space to like investigate these ideas or the different parts of my life that didn't feel as cohesive or put together.
Right. There's an expansiveness to reading, right? Like, I mean, it's exactly what you're describing. You've got a situation at home. You're not entirely sure how to handle it. And yet at the same time, you're not the only person who's been this person, done this thing, experienced this thing. And it's like, oh, you're kind of just looking for behavior to model. And sometimes you find it on the page. And, it could be fiction. It could be not. Like, you don't necessarily need a manual, right? Like, there is no, what's the manual for Glory? What's the manual for Well-Read Black Girl?
Everyone has like their different things. And even I write it, I think people will be surprised about Hatchet. So I write about the book Hatchet. Yep. And I remember being so like connected to the characters or the character because both of his parents were divorced. And I was like, oh, like that's a thing. Like people, we can like talk about this out loud. Like I don't have to be embarrassed by this. Like that's okay. And, and like, I don't think people will make like, oh, Glory and Hatchet, like where did that come from? But it was a really influential book for me. And the same thing for like Little Women. Like I was like so obsessed with Jo March, and because she
You
was
and
a
I were both
writer,
Jo March.
like I think, that's the universal, but that's because I wanted to be a writer. And I was
Yeah.
like, her writing was like, I was like, I can like write my own book. I can be like young, and she has all her siblings. I had my siblings. Like that was the connection I saw, and got so excited to be like embody that character. So it was just so many things that like I would kind of pick and choose and see like reflections of myself in the pages and the chapters and the characters.
I mean, listen, I had a thing for Little House on the Prairie when I was 6. I really wanted to build a sod house in the backyard, and my parents were like, please don't do that.
Please
Just don't do that. No, you cannot. And I had a garden trowel, and I was going to go out and dig my own. And my parents were like, please don't do this. This is the worst possible idea you made.
But I commend you for even just having that like gumption to be like, let's go.
And yet at the same time, not every book ages with us. I mean, books are, there are moments where books are sort of, I don't want to say cutting edge, but there are moments where they capture the zeitgeist, right? Like you find something in the ether and suddenly you've got 25 books on the same thing and you're going, what just happened? And sometimes stuff takes off and it's 50 years old and you're like, okay, I mean, listen, whatever brings you to books, I'm happy to have you at the table. Really, I'm okay with it.
And however you encounter them, like I think there's also this great debate between like literary fiction and commercial fiction. Like I will admit here, I have read Twilight. I have no problem with that. Like, you know what I mean? Like I read a lot of things, and I think what really drives me is the curiosity aspect of it. Like, can we have a conversation? Can we be in discourse? Can we like sit together and like unpack this? That is what I truly believe what makes a person well read. It's not if you've read Shakespeare or Walt Whitman or all the classics, like I will admit I have never read Moby Dick. It just wasn't it didn't come across my syllabus. I have no interest, okay? No interest.
Right.
But like I am also, I have my library is wide, and it has like a lot of beautiful diverse voices, and it also has the classics too. Like all those things matter, and how you embody it and take it out into the world and connect with other people. That is like the hope for someone just being a well-rounded, creative, and curious person.
So for me, Moby Dick used to be a reread once a year kind of thing when I was much younger.
Really? Okay.
But I grew up on the coast of Massachusetts like that. Like the sense of place and the adventure and the whole like, the ridiculous. And also I had, I had feelings about authority. And so the guy chasing the whale totally made sense.
Maybe I'll do it now. Can I do it on audiobook? How about that?
Yeah, you can, but you need good narrators. And it's like 77 hours. So just choose wisely. But the thing is, I don't need to go back now. I sort of needed it until a certain point in my 20s. And it's sort of become a running joke on the show that Middlemarch has become like my kryptonite. So many people have recommended Middlemarch to me. I own 2 copies of Middlemarch with French flaps and everything. And every time I go to pick it up, I just stare at it and it stares back at me. I've tried to have a book club with friends. Apparently Middlemarch is just not going to be in my future. And at some point, this copy will get donated.
I have to admit, I am a Middlemarch girl.
Okay, see, I'm adding you to the list of people.
So, but there are all these things, but like we shouldn't discount each other or,
no, not at all.
Do the book judgment because one person has read this and they haven't read that. Yes, there's like subjects and books that are like they live in the literary canon and they hold such power, but we can expand that and we can find other things that can guide us and start new conversations, and we're on the cusp of like a presidential election and so many things are happening. I want new books in that. Like I'm so excited about Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book, The Message.
It's great.
New books that are added and expand conversations and help us like rethink the way we engage with literature and how we engage with the world. So, I was trying for that in my memoir, really trying to be clear that all these things, yes, the majority of them are written by Black and brown people, but there are other stories that have shaped my thinking and my perspective. They're all of these things have added to me. And I'm so grateful for the teachers I had and the experiences I had. I had one particular teacher that was amazing, my AP English teacher. And him and I, like he's truly one of like Mr. Burns was amazing. Is amazing. He's an amazing person and like an incredible teacher. I had the opportunity to be in his class when I was at Wakefield High School. And even him and I had a moment where we were in like fierce debate about the quality of Maya Angelou's writing, and it was a little critical. And I had a moment where I had to like defend it, and I had to really like tell him why it was so meaningful to me. And it makes me think of the experiences we're having now with censorship and just like this hold on intellectual freedom. Young people need to be in discourse with their teachers, with the world around them. They need to disagree. That's what shapes their agency and their perspective in the world. That's what makes them literary citizens. So we need more of that, more civic engagement. And I think that really starts with books.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to a larger point that you and I were making at the top of the show, which is community, and connection. And again, reading is not a passive act.
It's not.
It is not a passive act. And it is an opportunity. Let's talk about, the American dream, right? Like when you look at how the American dream has been framed for years and years and years, or this whole idea of westward expansion. I spend a lot of time in California and how California gets framed, right? All of these things where it's like, well, yeah, we were taught a certain thing. And listen, I grew up in Massachusetts. You want to talk pilgrims? I can talk pilgrims.
There you go.
Pilgrims. I've seen Plymouth Rock multiple times. I've stood on a replica of the Mayflower. And, then you read Ned Blackhawk, The Rediscovery of America, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, giant gaps in my education, right?
Yeah.
But it is kind of up to me to fill in the gaps, but at least I also know that there are gaps.
Yeah. I mean, the gaps that we can fill in with scholarship, with history, but also with fiction. When you said that, the first book that came to mind was There by Tommy Orange. Fiction allows you to, again, enter these new worlds, have these new conversations and think, okay, what if it's this way? And I particularly love that book because it gives you like the interior, like what someone is feeling inside, what are they like their wayward lives? What does that look like? What does it feel like? And there's not a lot of times you can share that kind of intimacy. And that's like the beauty of fiction that goes that route, or even memoirs that are super vulnerable on the page and open. Like you just want to know what people are thinking. And we can go in our silos and like read by ourselves, but there's so much more when you join that book club, when you go to that bookstore, when you sit someone next to someone and talk about it. There's just so much more you can learn and expand from that, like that one-on-one encounter.
And also listening to you riff on There, my first thought too was something I had said early on, which is it has all the kinetic energy of a crime novel set in LA.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Like think about how we meet everyone and how it moves, and it's the constant, right? And I love it. But it's not necessarily what some people might expect when we're talking about what the indigenous population looks like in Oakland, California.
It's more modern. Like you said, it has that pace, it has that energy, and we need those exchanges. Like it's so paramount that people have these experiences and read beyond their scope and like just open up to different voices that are unlike their immediate community and the people they see on like a daily basis.
Right. And I mean, it's part of the fun too. We just reopened a store in Santa Monica, California, and I was out there and I was shopping the shelves waiting for someone to finish what they were doing so we could go to lunch. And dude bops in and I'm sort of watching, because it's fun to see what people pick off the shelves. And he pulled Beale Street, If Beale Street Could Talk, the Baldwin novel off the shelf. And he'd been meaning to read. And I was like, oh, I love that one. It's so great. And when you think about how Beale Street still reads, right? Yeah. It was written in what, 72?
72, 73.
Early 70s. So, I mean, the book is not young, to be kind. It's 50 years old, and yet it's still fresh. It's still fresh. Way too relevant. Way too relevant.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I remember I reread it when the film came out. So they had the film in 2019, maybe.
It was pre-lockdown.
Yeah. And so I remember just being so enamored with like the sentences. He is like such a master at these like beautiful, long, very elegant sentences that sometimes I feel like run on. They're like, they go for days, but he captured like their love and like the dilemma of just feeling like trapped by their circumstances. And you could easily take that story and that plot and put it in 2024 and it would completely have the same urgency and impact and like the beauty of it, and that is what makes timeless writing. Like that's why people keep going back to James Baldwin, because his writing is so timeless and urgent and full of admiration for the people that he's writing about. Like there just feels like there's like a mutual respect of the characters that I'm just so taken by. It's when we read it, it almost feels effortless. You're like, wow, like he's just like able to do it, but that's not a easy thing at all.
I get so excited when I see someone reading a writer I love for the first time, like Cormac McCarthy, Jesmyn.
Jesmyn
Ward.
Oh my gosh, Jesmyn was just
Salvage the Bones is great, but Sing Unburied Sing top 10 all time. Like my top 10 gets, it rolls around, right? It's the same for you, but that always on the top 10.
The way that I'm holding my words because I love Jesmyn Ward so much, but I also Let Us Descend, girl.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay, let's talk about that for a second.
That first sentence.
Oh, what a whirlwind. What a whirlwind.
My mother's hand was the first weapon I ever held. That first sentence, I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
The research that went into that book. And I was thinking of her work as just like, where do you start? Like if someone had never experienced her work before, do you start with her memoir? Where do you go? And I really feel like it's Let Us Descend, which might be controversial, like unpopular opinion.
We're going to have to thumb wrestle because I would say Sing Unburied Sing. Sing Unburied Sing for me is the one. Actually, I was talking to a friend who teaches in Colorado. We had lunch yesterday and we were sort of running through some current titles. And I was like, well, that's the one I would teach is Sing Unburied Sing. Because again, it pulls so many different, like you can see the Morrison bits, you can see the Gothic, you can see the present day, you can see all of, and I happen to love Leonie as a character and I happen to love JoJo as a character.
I know JoJo, I know.
Right.
I think what took me with Let Us Descend is just like the dialogue and just like, again, you get, which maybe this is just like my calling card because I'm obsessed with the interior. Like you really get into like the character's mind, and to think about what it means to be an enslaved person and take that journey into like down south. Like that was just so transcendent for me. But yeah, I mean, all her work is gold, clearly. It's just
without a doubt. But the other thing for me with Let Us Descend is I went back to Dante.
Oh, yes.
I read Purgatorio before I sat down because that is such a fundamental piece. And also, I will say, I read very quickly. Like that is my superpower. I can.
Could you read Dante?
You can lock yourself in a room for 2 days and come out for. I'm glad I did it, but would I have done it without knowing that I wanted to have fresh in my head for sitting down with her? And I think we referenced it for maybe 77 seconds. I mean, but it's the principle of the thing, right? It's a building block of that piece of work for her. Yeah. And also, frankly, I had not read it since I don't know when. And maybe, did I even finish it the first time? I have no idea. And I was like, all right, here we go.
Feel like my freshman year of college, maybe my sophomore year. Yeah. But it's been a minute. But even like revisiting the moment when she's like, they're like using it as she's like teaching her how to read and like she puts it out. I was like, and then, I mean, again, more connections, more metaphors. So it's just there's like this beautiful through line through that book. I love that book so much. Like, it's such a great book.
Percival Everett's James, right? I am not a Huck Finn person. I will own it. No. And I read James twice. Yeah, I read James cold.
James is Percival Everett is a genius, and the accolades and everything. Erasure is my favorite book by him, but it's overdue. The fact James is winning every single award, it's like, yes, this is right. But this is also a great example of how taking a work of literature that is in the canon and flipping it. It's introducing so many new conversations. It's allowing people to revisit their, Huck Finn and like think about that dynamic and again in a different context. It's brilliant. And the satire, like all of it is just so brilliant and like refreshing.
But it also pulls from Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which is a novel I love Invisible Man. And there's some references there. But also, honestly, I did go back. I got a Norton Critical edition of Huckleberry Finn.
Wow. What
and I did it.
On that? What's the annotation in that book?
I did it. 15-year-old me was laughing, 15-year-old. And, obviously, Huck Finn is an important book for a lot of people. It's part of the... And I Yeah, I did it.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
You can read James either way, right? Like if you have Huck Finn fresh in your brain, great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't,
but even if you have no reference,
exactly,
right? It
works. It's still
very captivating.
Totally works.
I love that book. I love it so much. James is brilliant.
All right, so you said you're reading for interiority. I also feel like you read for voice. I know I read for voice, right? Like I'm less interested if stuff happens, and so this makes me slightly problematic because I don't necessarily need stuff to happen, but I need sentences that are, I need the sentence.
I do. I love a sexy sentence. I also have an affinity for short stories. And a short story is all about voice. Like you're doing it in this very condensed, this very it's a box,
Yeah.
You have to get it all done in these limited amount of pages. And so Jamaica Kincaid, ZZ Packer, they're just the masters of this art form. And that's probably one of the things I struggled with the most within my memoir was dialogue and trying to figure out if it was holding the reader. I didn't want it to be too slow at parts. I wanted it to feel like it had a flow and it was moving forward. And even if you didn't know every single aspect of my life, you understood the bigger picture and you understood what I was experiencing at that moment, Yes, but I do love voice. I love it to feel authentic to the person, to the character, that really it holds your attention. And I go to that a lot. And it also depends on genre, what you're reading, but that energy is something that I enjoy reading.
And also dialogue and voice are not necessary. We need a moment here to just say dialogue and voice, not the same, not the exact, right?
It's different. It's totally different.
And years ago, a buddy of mine was getting his MFA and he spent a year reading plays. And I was like, this makes a ton of sense.
Yes.
But at the same time, because if you're talking about cadence of right, dialogue is always going to need a certain cadence. So if you're reading Sam Shepard's plays versus reading a novel by Sam Shepard or a short story or the memoir or whatever, and I'm just using him as an example because he does write across genres. I'm waiting for David Henry Hwang to write a memoir. I'm like, please. And I don't think it's going to happen, but I would really like it to happen. But the idea too that, the words change because of format, because not just of what you're trying to do or how you're trying to do it. And, words make us, right?
They make us. I was talking, I had another favorite book. If I say this is my favorite book, I promise you they're all my favorite books. Another favorite book of mine is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith.
I love that book.
Such a perfect book. But I think that's another, great example of scholarship and voice and dialogue, because he does all those things so brilliant. He just has this lyrical quality when he's telling a story, but also when he's, in one of these locations where he's at the Glory Islands or wherever he is, it holds you in such a profound way. And I think because he does have this way of intersecting poetry and also this academic quality of citing the spaces that he's in. And it's just as, I don't even know how to articulate the brilliance of it, but it when you read it. You can see how he's holding the reader's attention and sharing information, but also, telling this brilliant story between him and his grandfather. It's just this very beautiful skill that you have to have experience in all these different mediums and read across things to bring it into one's place. Another perfect example, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Most people forget that he is a poet. Ta-Nehisi Coates, yes, he's done all these incredible things.
Sonia Sanchez, major influence.
Absolutely. He is a poet, and that comes across in his journalism, in the way he does his reporting, and the attention he has with his subjects. You have to be well read and widely read in all these things because they come out in the work, So if you are naturally gravitate to poetry and you it comes out in your article in the New York Times or whatever the case may be, all of that comes out. And I now have an incredible, very rambunctious son, and I want to expose him to the world and to, the joys of reading every subject, whether it's science fiction or poetry, memoir, all of these things, because I know it's it feels like little deposits. It's just like,
completely.
just entering his mind and his soul, like just slowly, slowly. And I had those experiences as a young person, just like reading things that just captured my interest and made me like, just gave me pause, like, oh, like, what does that mean? And then I love listening to voice when we were just talking about voice, but another habit I have is just going into the archive and listening to, like Lucille Clipson or Audre Lorde, like going to Library Congress and listening to them, like just read poetry out loud. I did read my audiobook and I did read everything out loud as I was writing because that is a different experience. The audio experience is essential too. So it all counts as reading. Some people, I know there's a controversy of our audiobooks books. They are.
They are books.
They are
Oh, I
absolutely
just full
books.
stop. They're books. Full
They're
stop.
books.
They are books. Read however you're
Period.
going to read. I will use audiobooks a lot to actually reread when I'm prepping for a show, because if it's something that, and especially if it's a text that I know well,
Yeah.
it's more, you kind of just need to remind yourself what
And it's a different way of experiencing and engaging and embodying the text. Like they all count. However you engage with literature, it all counts. Buying it at a bookstore, going to the library, downloading, an audiobook, it all counts towards the edification of yourself.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, part of it, again, is just knowing that there's a whole world out there that isn't everything you already know, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, I like to be surprised. I like to be challenged. I'm an adult walking through the world, but I also know that I don't know everything, right?
It's also good to kind of like, okay, I mean, maybe because it's just like on my mind. I'm thinking so much about politics right now.
Right. No, I get it.
I'm always curious to like really understand or even just like sit with the opinions of other people. Because one thing that's like, okay, let me at least try to follow your logic. And if I think it's like nonsensical, that's fine. But at least I have space for understanding it. In one way, there is a compassion that happens. And another way, it helps me refine my argument and make sure that like I could even be more crystal clear about what I feel strongly about, what my values are. Like I think all of it is important, like we need to sit with things that we disagree with, that we feel uncomfortable with. We need to have more space for discourse and to debate. And we have, with the election, there's plenty of debates happening right now, but I feel prepared for it more so than I did, 10 or 20 years ago. Little Glory probably would have, shied away from, doing certain things that would make other people feel uncomfortable or sharing my opinion too loud. No longer, I really feel I know who I am. I know where I want to stand when it comes to certain subjects and how I want to advocate for other people. And all that came with time and experience and a lot of reading, like reading through the things I didn't understand, reading through the places that I hadn't gone to visit yet, that I was curious about. All of it is all of it was from reading. And after I wrote the book, I could tell that like sometimes I feel we take the reading for granted. Like you assume like you're just like, oh, it's just a book. And it's like, no, like it's not just a book. It can really transform your whole life, like your whole the way you just engage with the world. One book can do that, like, and I've had that happen to me several times where I've read something and I've like been firm about, okay, like I want to change this or I need this to help me become more of the person that I want to be or how I want to show up. So books are powerful and I'm grateful for them.
Yeah, same. I mean, there was no other way for me. There was going to be no other way. And even now, and I'm sitting in the studio, obviously, so this isn't even my personal, bookcase, but there's a lot here where it's just like, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's also being able to put books into context. I mean, the more you read, the larger your context gets, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to read every book by every person ever or every book in someone's catalog. It's just find the thing that makes your eyes shine. Like, I mean, I'm watching both of us on the screen right now, and I'm like, yeah, we are book nerds.
I'm in my office at Paulsen Bros, and I still have things that like are close to me that I love and just like offer me a little bit of comfort. And
yeah, I see that Andrea Eliot Invisible Child behind you. I see that spine. I love that book. I absolutely love that book.
so many. Of course, I have my favorite. I am obsessed with Lucille Clifton.
Mm-hmm. I have that at home.
And you see like the notes in it, like there are just things here. And I am so grateful to always get like a galley and to like blurb for people. And, however I can just like practice my own literary citizenship in the way that I can. I feel very grateful for the privilege and the platform that I have. But again, if all that went away, I would still be pre-ordering at my local bookstore and going to my library. I would still be doing all these things because it's like who I am. And I just feel really grateful. I'm still like in shock. I'm like, I wrote a whole like memoir. Like I really told like my whole life, but I'm glad I did it. I'm really proud of myself. And now it's like, what's next? Like talking to people. I hope it helps a lot of people, especially young people that may be experiencing family members that have had mental health crises or are just feeling a little bit alone or burdened. I hope my like revelation will just offer them some comfort and some direction. Just like when I picked up that Maya Angelou book when I was a young person, I hope someone picks up my book and says like, oh, I can like get through this thing because I had this text in my hand that inspired me and encouraged me. And that's what at the end of the day, that's why I did it. That's really why I did it. And then also for my son, I wanted my writing really feels like a legacy and something I could pass on to him. So if he needs to know something about our family, I'm like, here it is. It's like, it's in this book and I could add more context to that. I can tell, more stories, but this is a good primer for you to start, So that's really just, the reason why all of this exists and why I decided to write Gather Me.
It's a total delight. It's an absolute delight. And that is where we're going to end this show. Thank you so much. Glory Edim, I adore you. I'm so happy we got to hang out. This was amazing.
Awesome. I'm so grateful that I'm having this conversation with you. This is one of the first interviews I'm doing, and I'm just grateful for you. Thank you for making me feel comfortable and giving me space to share my story.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.